So welcome, Green After Death Group. Most of us here from Thurston County, but guests from far away as well, and actually members from far away too. So today we want to spend this first half hour talking about our time with Freddie Johnson from Prairie Creek in Florida. We had a lovely time with him a few weeks back. And I know that I took about 4 pages of notes, and I assume all of you have some notes and thoughts and feelings and questions about that as well. So that's what we're going to focus on for the first half hour. Because Lee is with us for this first bit, I thought we might go ahead and just have some quick introductions. What I'm going to ask is that we just take 30 seconds of quiet right now. Because what I will ask of you is to share 5 words. Instead of doing a full introduction about ourselves, Lee has a document from our December meeting that kind of touches on who most of us are, not our new folks, and we'll deal with that. Kim, I might want you to say a little bit more. But the rest of us, Lee kind of has a feel for. So let's just take 30 seconds, think about 5 words, if you could just, that describes kind of why you're here or what's important to you in this space. Except for you, Kim, I want you to think about maybe a 45 or 60-second introduction. So if you want to jot some things down, 5 words to kind of cover where you are and what brings you here. Okay. The other thing I would ask is that we all mute when we're not speaking. That's especially important on the phone lines, the way the air travels across the speaker on the phones. So if you know how to mute or if you need help, let me know. I think I can actually do some muting as well, which comes with the added challenge of remembering to unmute when it's your turn to talk. So I'm just going to pick Evan. Would you mind going first? Unmute yourself first.
I just said not at all. My words are still very committed, energized, curious, needing clarifying of goals and regrouping of this group.
I like that. Okay. Holly?
This is my life's purpose.
Wow. Karen?
Interfaith chaplain, witnessing, group heart, time out of time.
Nice. Laura?
Green death encourages green life.
I love you guys. Kim?
Hi, everyone. Since I'm a 45-seconder instead, I'll just say my former professional life, I have spent in horticulture and in finance. I am conservation focused and green burial thrilled. It's a new thing to me. Lots of things right now are new. So I am, my learning is drinking from a fire hose, and I'm wet, but I love it. And thank you all for the wisdom and the connection and the openness and the passion for this wonderful stuff.
Thank you. Hillary?
Eco-friendly, death care, passionate.
Nice. Lee?
Green burial advocacy, funeral reform.
Lovely.
Sorry, which reform?
Funeral.
Thank you.
And I would say return, options, love, and daunted. And maybe government weary, but that puts me over one word. Okay, thank you so much for that. Beautiful, just beautiful. So with that, am I forgetting anything, Hillary? Can we just launch into, yep, let's just launch into our time with Freddie. And I don't have any thought about being organized about this. We're down to it's 11:10, so we have 20 minutes to devote to this. And it's being recorded, so let's not feel too frantic about what gets covered and what doesn't, because this conversation will continue. So is there anybody that's really kind of itching to go first to kind of cover questions or thoughts? No? Hillary, do you want to go first? How do you feel about that? Or would you like someone else to go first?
You know what? I would love to be in listening mode for a time.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Holly. Oh, wait, Evan. Let's go with Evan first, Holly. Thank you.
I was particularly, I guess maybe enchanted is too big a word, but incredibly enthused with his energy, his values, his way of being collegial, his love of being a nonprofit and having it be volunteer driven, and his accomplishment over the last 13 or 15 years. So I was really so attracted to what he has wrought in Florida. And I would love to be part of something with similar values and similar facts on the ground, or in the ground, so to speak.
Yeah, I get it.
And just one other thing, it reminded me so much of my passion as a 40-some-year-old starting the mediation agency here. And I just felt so, there was so much parallel to my own experience I could relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, Holly.
Well, I would agree with everything that Evan said. I mean, that it was, I felt that way too. I'm so excited and energized and eager to, I've been using the euphemism shovel polishing, just really getting ready, saying, okay, where do we start? Where are we now? How do we begin? And I mean, I think everybody knows, maybe not Kim and Laura, but I'm down on the Monterey Bay here in California, and really, really invested in taking what we learn in Washington State and covering the whole Pacific Coast here with this kind of knowledge, and so eager to really put the bookshelf together. What do we need to know in order to, as I've been saying, get ready for yes. And there was so much about what Freddie was saying that I found incredibly inspiring, and yet, I'm like, where do we start? I just feel this sense of urgency, and like I want to get over the threshold from, gee, wouldn't it be great if, to here we go.
Yeah.
This is Laura. Ditto to both of you. And I mostly, for me, as a visual sensate feeler kind of person, I just love the vision that he brings in terms of the actual visuals from watching the video, because how did it work? Goals are dreams with plans, something like that. And so to have the vision of that, even just to inspire us, not to as much to frustrate us because we can't get there. I would love to get there, that specific there, because it's exactly the image, all the pieces of it. And it's just so great that it already exists in the world and that we're having access, thanks to all of you who made that happen, to a wise man like him who seemed extremely patient and as well as very knowledgeable. I wasn't able to really be at the level of questions and answers that you guys were doing, but I appreciate that we all have different strengths and pieces of this. So thanks, everybody.
You're just where you need to be. I really resonate with what you said, Laura. So for me, the things that really stood out were the social justice aspect of how they're approaching their work. That is something that is definitely, if we're getting to the stage where we're starting to envision and think about what we value, that's definitely high on my list. I know I've heard you say that, Evan, and others too. I was fascinated by their model of having kind of that parent agency, or that's probably not the right relationship, but the relationship with the tribal government or the nonprofit that was the Chiwa Conservation Trust. I guess it was a conservation trust. I mean, I know we've kind of seen some different models, but that was interesting to me, not knowing at all if that's something that would be applicable to us, but it seemed like, I know it had its benefits and drawbacks, but that's something I'd like to learn more about. Maybe that's the way most conservation burial or cemeteries are functioning. I'm not sure. I was kind of relieved to hear, I mean, I was in government long enough to know that partnerships are where it's at, and turning those partnerships into something that are viable, which is kind of covers my second point. But thinking specifically about the colleges that he mentioned and county government, I just immediately felt a little bit of sense of relief. It's like, oh yeah, when I think about, Thurston County government, or maybe it's Grays Harbor or wherever, or, Mason County or the surrounding counties that we think might be a little more conducive to this. It breaks it down enough for me to think about, oh, I've been here, I've lived here my whole life. I know people there, and maybe they're not the right people, but it just helps me to kind of take the bite versus thinking this is too big, where do we start? So that was super helpful to hear those tangible examples when I think about Evergreen and St. Martin's and the kind of potential that is there, and knowing that some of this work has already been done. When I first started on the cemetery and funeral board, there was a presentation from some Evergreen students about green burial. So those things are, possibly cultivating out there anyway. I love the example that he gave of planting a tree, because there's so much social media and media around all these new options and burial and planting a tree and being a pod and, all these things that most of us know are mostly sensational. But the way he took that and then said, oh, you want to plant a tree? Here's how we would do that. Put some real tangible, here's our program for that. So I just feel like there's just some, and I'm super curious about consultancy. I know he worked with, if I'm not mistaken, pretty sure he worked with Land Matter or Land. I always forget the name of the
Land matters.
Land matters. Thank you, Lee. And I just wonder how that fits into our equation, and that probably is putting the cart before the horse, but that's something that's just really rumbling around in my mind. And maybe that's something we covered during our Lee time, but so there are my thoughts. Hillary, did you have anything before?
Sure, and then I'd love to hear from Karen and Kim also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so a few things, and I say, yes, it was so exciting, and I loved how he said, we started out just like you. It was like monthly meetings, a few people, and it was an organic process. Love his volunteer core. Love how he talked about, we would go to funeral homes. They'd want nothing to do with us. And now they're coming knocking saying, woo, we need to learn from you. And how it was the conservation groups in their community that are supportive, and how can we find those same groups for what we're talking about. So very inspiring, delighted we're here. Thanks.
So yeah, I just echo what everyone has said. I'm really was very excited about witnessing Freddie and his vision and the fruition of the vision, but also learning the timeline gave me some sense of ease, just knowing that it could take a long time or things could fall together, that there's so much synchronicity that's possible. I feel like the time is ripe. I was very encouraged, and it helped to have kind of a historic view from someone who's done it. So I've just been sitting here making notes of local people and connections, kind of like you, Angie, just thinking about who our allies might be locally and places to explore. So I'm excited about that.
Great.
Yeah.
Kim.
And for me, yeah, hi. So I would echo the feelings of encouragement and the gratitude for Freddie's time. And I say that up front because as you all get to know me a little bit better, you might find that I will nod when you are saying these wonderful, life affirming and death affirming things. And then I'll jump right into the nitty gritty. And I tend to sound a little mechanical or just, all that to say, it was very affirming to hear a lot of what he said. And my heart, is in it. Having said that, I would echo what Hillary said, just the concrete advice that trying to work through funeral homes initially might be something of a waste of time. That was something concrete that I took away that I think is hugely valuable, because it feels like starting up an endeavor like this, it's very easy to spend the same hour 3 different ways. And of course you don't have, that's not actually possible. So that was really valuable. I was curious when he talked about the different models, or he touched very briefly on how the Prairie Creek model is different from the Ramsey Creek model. And so I would have been curious to hear a little bit more about that. And I don't know if he just means for-profit versus 501c3, or if there's more nuance there. But that's one of the questions that I've been chewing on. I was grateful that he shared their alternate approach to taking pre-need dollars. So for me, that was something that, the devil's in the details kind of a thing. But I was very interested and encouraged to think about what that might look like and where that might be advantageous. I got the sense, I talked to Brian a little bit one-on-one, and I got the sense that there might be a common view that being set up to accept pre-need dollars really is the way to go, or there might be a market advantage there. And certainly that could be true, but it was valuable for me to hear Freddie talk a little bit about that. So those were some of the things. And then of course Laura, to echo your comment about people with different strengths, I'm a numbers and plants person, not necessarily people person. So I get a lot out of the qualitative things that folks talk about. And in terms of social justice, and with Native folks in particular, I think there are some very active tribes kind of in the part of Washington that we're all thinking about. And I have reached out on my own, but in a very cautious way to the Quinault tribe who are on the Olympic Peninsula. And I think, but I think, there are several tribes, and I think, anyway, there's work to be done there, but I'm excited to do it. And I think that there's the potential to do some really fantastic things in partnership there. So those were kind of high level takeaways for me.
Thank you. Holly, I know you had your hand up again.
Well, it's interesting because Kim just spoke to something that's been bubbling for me, which has to do with looking at ways that we could potentially partner with Indigenous people to assist in restoring their native homelands in various ways. And I think it would be really an amazing thing if we could do that, in part by saying, if we can help by burying our dead on your land, to help make it possible to keep it from getting bulldozed, and as is in danger of happening down here in the neighboring county. The Amundsen people are trying to keep from having their sacred mountain basically leveled and turned into a gravel pit. So this may be something, and I have some other thoughts, but I think I'll save questions for our conversation with Lee.
This is Laura. This this is community. This is community. And when we speak of, this is community growing, a thing that grows community. And so just quickly, I'm excited about the networking potential in all the various ways. And I think Karen Lohman and I have a real strength in that. We mentioned it at the beginning. So I got immediately excited because of also the connection between tribes and a conservation district and land trusts. And so that just pulls the image right in for me. And then just a little note to not being white people and proposing something, definitely having a vision, but I think including and asking as we approach others and that aren't in our group, that we would love to have, that we would like to add, like you said, to whatever struggle it is, in whatever way it is that they would like us to. And then I think that was, then so also, how about everybody, the immigrant community, the people of color, I've been musing on, from this discussion, I just was like, I really want to talk about, like, I'm so curious about how do we reach out? And that's not a question that I asked Freddie, but how do we, reach out to the people that, like people who I thought I would ask a friend, hey, have you ever thought about where you want to go when you die? Would you be interested in this? And just that. So all the networking potential is fires me up, because I love to do people to people, or whatever. I love to reach out and get excited with other people. So
Thank you. Thank you. Whoa, you guys are good. It's 11:30 sharp. Thank you so much. And we've got it recorded. I think that this kind of free-flowing debrief is healthy, especially as we flow into the next part of this with Lee. So consider this our transition. Hillary, thanks again for securing Freddie. And I love the way everybody's just kind of doing their part and bringing people to the table. And same with you, Holly. Thanks for reaching out to Lee so readily. And I just like for you to kind of introduce her, if you will, even though most of us have some idea of Lee and who she is. Still, it'll be fun.
Right. Well, okay, good. I get to do that. And fortunately, you made it a lot easier for me, because if you want to read about Lee's credentials, they're actually right there in the agenda. So I'm going to skip that part and be just much more up close and personal, and say Lee is a dear friend, co-conspirator, colleague, absolutely amazing source of inspiration to me. I feel incredibly honored to know her and to be able to work shoulder to shoulder with her on really exciting projects, and to have come across somebody who is, I would say, equally dedicated to the environmental and human urgency of our mission. Is just really extraordinary. And I don't know what else to say, unless I ran quickly down to my garden and brought up my gong and went, Lee, please.
Okay, back at you, HB. Thanks everybody for inviting me to be here. I'm always excited to talk to groups that are looking to start up, because there's so many pieces and parts to this, and I have to wear a lot of different hats in this work. Obviously there's the green burial nuts and bolts, like, what's it about? What does it look like? But I also do an awful lot of work with organizations like this to in startups, because when we're thinking about starting up a cemetery, we're thinking about a business, we're thinking about, all the things that you've just mentioned, we're thinking about, how we're going to actually make it happen. And Freddie is absolutely one of my best sources, by the way, for information over the years. He's been wonderful, but we'll get you plenty more. But today, what Holly Blue had asked me to do is come in and talk to you about the "You Are Here" model, with the, just the here we are, and where I think you might be so far from her description. And I may be wrong on a whole lot of this, but you'll forgive me. I put together a quick sort of presentation, more for my benefit than yours, because otherwise I'll just keep going. But I want to go through it in terms of what it means to start up an organization, regardless of what it's for. Although in this case, we'll try to keep it in context. I just want to, a lot of the points that you brought up, I think I am going to touch on here. So hopefully there'll be a way to work your way through those questions. I have all of this. I'm going to be able to send it to you in a PDF form. So if I go quickly through it, don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. You'll still have it. I also have put together some other detailed materials for you. We're just about to push the button on the funeralpartnership.org website for Washington. So this is a lot of the information I have, particularly the legal information that you need for cemeteries, is pretty fresh. So I've got that. I've got a few other things to share with you, but for the moment, what I want to do is go in and just show you my sparkling new presentation that I am hoping will come up very quickly here. And there we go. So basically what I wanted to do was tell you, at least from where I think you're sitting, you're in phase 2 already. So let's take a look at phase 1. Basically, when people get together, this is kind of my garage band theory, where, you want to have a garage band, you have this great inspiration, then you gather together all your friends in the garage, you have an agreement that you're going to put something together, and then you sort of build that energy until you get to a point where you are committed to the course. And it feels to me, from what I've just heard and what Holly Blue's been telling me, is that you're pretty much there. You're still pulling in some pieces and parts, but you're pretty close to we. It can take organizations years to get there. You guys seem to have been able to do pretty well. The next phase, though, and this is where I think you're at, is the hunting and gathering stage. And a lot of people skip this. They want to go to, okay, let's go buy some land. Let's get, see, are we going to have an executive director? Are we going to have a, how are we going to use our volunteer force? All these kinds of questions that aren't ready to be asked yet. You certainly can do 2 things at one time, but, if you are moving faster, but for the most part, these are some things that we need to be really taking a deep breath and looking at, because you are not just starting something, you are in relationship with the people that you're doing it with. So there are 2 major parts to this. The first is the building relationship part, and most people don't take enough time to do it. One of the first things that you're going to need to do, if you're going to take this on seriously and you're going to be forming an organization of some kind in the state of Washington, it will have to be a corporation. That's the only category that Washington has. You probably already know that. But a lot of people don't go here first, but you've got to go to the agreement on how you're going to make decisions. Do it before you have a major decision, because you're really going to manage this differently if you start off at the same footing on this question, because you've got a whole lot of models that you're going to be looking at for how you make decision. And I've put those together for you too. The next thing you need to be doing, and I know you've been getting to know each other, but I would suggest that you really take time, particularly take some retreat time, and take a few hours, hopefully work with a professional who can really talk about what those roles are going to be in that corporation. You're going to have a board of some kind. You're going to have to understand who's got skills, what kind of skills do they have. Are we going to limit that to the board members that you're pulling in, the people that you have in your group right now? Are you going to pull in some more professionals for their specific skill sets? Are you going to allow volunteers into that? What's your recruiting strategy going to be about bringing in the right people, not just more people, but the right people? That takes time to sort through, and understanding each other's style around that. When you're designing an organization, no matter what it is, I don't care what it is, whether you end up not being a nonprofit, whether you're for-profit, you still need to understand, like, really deep down what that mission is. And if it's, oh, we're just going to start a conservation burial cemetery in our area, you haven't dug deep enough. And you need to be able to then not only all be on the same page about that, and selection of language. And boy, you guys have a marvelous vocabulary already. I'm tuned to that kind of thing. And I was excited to hear that you're going to have a fabulous time putting together what this looks like and what that final elevator speech is, so that you can explain it to other people. That takes work. It's not just something you take off the top of your head. Another piece that you were touching on as well, identifying your network, finding out who those potential partners are. And this is just one part of a list. I mean, there are many more people and agencies, offices, lots of people you need to pull together. This is one of those fun, let's put it all together, see what you're thinking, see what I'm thinking, make sure we're all on the same page around this. And then from this, we'll, later on, we're going to come up with a plan for how we contact them and how we interact with them. But just identifying them is the best part. Communication protocols. This might seem like a sort of a duh moment, but understanding how you're going to communicate with each other, how you're going to manage documentation, because that's going to start. You're already recording something. You're going to have to put it somewhere. How are you going to manage that? Where's your document storage going to be? Simple things like this make a difference in how you interact with each other. So the relationship building part is very important. The second piece then is understanding the systems that you're about to come up against. I want to mention this. I popped this in because you were talking about models. At the Conservation Burial Alliance, this is something that Heidi Hannipol from Land Matters and I put together in order to try to identify what those different models are. And you're right, not just whether you're a 501c3 or a 501c3 13, whether you're owner operated, private, whatever. Each state, of course, has a different rule around how that works. So you're going to see this by state, but you're also going to see the different land trust partners. You're going to see what the active conservation goals are, because just saying we're going to buy some land and it's going to be conservation doesn't fit the conservation best practices. So you've got to start with the understanding of conservation best practices and language first, and then convert that to what you're going to need. So all these different pieces and parts are things that we are documenting and we're putting together in order to help groups like yours see that there are different ways to do it. Another really big piece of this is, and this is where I always start, is the law. So as I said, I put something together for you. Everybody needs to know the law, not just it'd be marvelous. You do need to hire an attorney who's going to help you through some of these things, particularly having to do with tax exemption, which is going to make a big difference when you decide how you're going to organize this. But as you can see, there are lots of parts to the law. It's not just one certain, oh gosh, this is how it works in Washington. There's a great deal of information around that. Oops, sorry, I skipped over. Again, that understanding the difference between types of corporations, that's really going to be important, because as I say, it's not just one thing, it's digging down layers and layers to figure out those things. I made a note particularly about private cemetery. If you were going to go with a private corporation, you'd be paying property taxes. This can be pretty significant. So it's just one little tiny detail to have you open up to the idea of looking at all your options first and hire somebody who can really explain it to you efficiently. This also will have a lot to do with succession planning. And I know this goes counter to anything that you're feeling and thinking right now, because you're in the throes of the excitement of that first initial phase of we're going to build something and it's going to be great. If you don't start thinking about what's going to happen when you're no longer running this right from the beginning, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So this is an important piece to and something to talk to an attorney about when you're looking at your governance status. These are just some details I throw in here for those different types of status, just so you can look at it later. I don't want to go over it now. Bylaws, no matter what kind of corporation you put together, you're going to have to write bylaws. This is another thing, and this is why you got to know each other really well before you go into deciding how that is all going to get written. You want to do it right. I just worked with a group that took somebody's old corporate, real corporation bylaws, and they managed to get it past the IRS when they were going for a C3. And I looked at it and it still had language about how they had to fax things to each other and all kinds of other crazy material that was in these bylaws that were really meant for a large group, like the NFL is a 501c3. It's like it had come from that. This is the bylaws are how we're going to run our lives in a cohesive manner from now on. They're not something to be afraid of. They're something to dive deep into and make them work for you. So that's going to be another phase thing that we're going to have to pay attention to. Money and how that's all going to work. When you're talking about pre-need, there's a whole set of laws around pre-need. And whether that works in Washington or not is something that we need to discuss with an attorney. And hopefully a CPA, you're going to be required to put up funds for endowments. And I'm not sure what that amount is. For some reason, I'm thinking 25,000, but I could be wrong. But the state requires those endowments for, and that they have to be managed in specific types of trust funds and investment accounts. So these are the types of things. And then additional revenue sources, what you can get away with and what you can't. What can you sell beyond the grave site? Can you sell monuments? Can you sell shrouds or something like that? So those kinds of things need to be nailed down too. So basically, right at this point, while you're in the getting to know each other phase, and you're excited, you're chomping at the bit to get to something that has some real, substance to it. One of the ways you get to know each other is by divvying up these responsibilities for, putting together that list of all the potential partners, and how are you going to build your network? So, start just making lists. Finding out what area cemeteries are charging for a grave, because grave sales tend to be real estate driven. You can come up with your own price, but if it isn't in keeping with what's around you, you're not going to get a lot of business. So you want to figure that out. Floating a survey to your community, or a group of communities, for instance, different church groups, or faith communities, senior citizens groups, things like that. Put together some surveys, start asking questions, find out what it is other people want to know from you. Again, that real estate data, and that's more for land purchase and that type of thing. But again, also conservation language, who's a conservation, start to put your conservation people in place so that you know what that looks like. And again, getting that data collection and storage platforms figured out for managing the cemetery once it's up. So that's separate from getting your data collection for running your organization. So those are some of the things that you want to be doing in this next phase as you go through it. I'll just give you a sneak peek at what the next piece is. Next piece is phase 3, and that's putting together, really designing those systems that all need to be able to speak to each other. If you go to buy land, you're going to want to know what the taxes and the bookkeeping and what the insurance and all that stuff is going to be. And you're going to have to be able to talk to your, explain that to the public. You're going to have a website that understands all the pieces and parts around that. And the mechanism for making those decisions, your internal governance pieces, how are you going to put all of those things together? So this is sort of that next step. Once you've put everything else together, then you put it in place. So that's it for what I wanted to show you quickly. And I don't know if that was the driest thing ever, but I can tell you, after working with so many different startups and working particularly with all the conservation burial folks so closely for the last few years, there are a lot of them have expressed to me that they wish that they had taken time over more of these things, and that they had more of a, here's where you are, here's what you need to be addressing together before you get to the next place. And there is something to be said for the organic, here's what just showed up, let's just grab it and run. You will, as my mother always used to tell me, she had 5 kids, came from a family of 10 kids. And she said to me, no matter what kind of phase your kid goes through, if they don't do it in the right order, they're always going to come back to it. And you don't want a 15-year-old doing what a 4-year-old should have learned. So that's kind of the theory here. Anyway, that's what I brought for you with the "you are here," I think. And you can probably set me straight on some of that and tell me what else you need, because I'm more than happy to share resources. So
Evan, go right ahead, Evan. Oh, you're unmute. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, am I unmuted now? Yep. Yes.
You're good.
Thanks so much, Lee. That your brilliance and your organizational development approach is just wonderful. It's exactly what we needed. And from my own experience with a startup nonprofit and with my background in applied behavioral science, this is exactly what we need. I wanted to ask you specifically if you had resources or knew of any regarding surveys of congregations or specifically faith groups in order to do information gathering as well as possible marketing of this idea.
Yeah, I don't have anything really in the can, but I think it would be pretty easy to put it together. I think we know what kind of, from other surveys that I've done, I think, and certainly that you've done, and a lot of you know your own communities really well. It's pretty easy to come up with the right questions. You know, we've got these sort of general, national, are people interested in Greenberry? Well, we know they are. Of course they are. So what are we really going to be asking people? And I think that's one of those group questions where you set aside an hour and you say, that's what we're going to work on together right now. And that's how you get to know each other. But it also means you come up with the right questions for your group. And I mean, I can, off the top of my head, come up with, a bazillion of them. Massachusetts might be the one we want to look at, is Green Burial, Massachusetts. And I've got that. I'll make a note. They did one and they asked questions like, how do you feel about monumentation? And then the answers were, across the board, of course, but it gave them a really good clue as to whether people were open to the idea of scattering gardens, for instance, in a green burial cemetery, whether there were people who didn't want any markers at all, whether there were, it just focused them on that one piece that can become such a stumbling block. So I think it's, I'm more than happy to work with you in that group if you're interested to come up with those right questions.
Thanks so much, Lee. Very encouraging.
Yeah, it's good stuff. That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
The startup is always the fun stuff.
You bet.
Who else? Questions for Lee?
This is Kim. I've got a quick question. So I've reached out to a couple of different attorneys in the Olympia area, and I'm finding that finding an attorney with the expertise that I need is a little bit challenging. Is that a personal problem, or do you have any tips for how I should be? A way to find an attorney that's who's going to have the expertise that we need?
Yeah, really good question. And I did a little research on that for you already. I found a couple of people who like to think that they're really good cemetery folks, but they're not necessarily green burial cemetery folks. So I mean, that's one of the things we're trying to do at the CBA is pull together a national list of cemetery attorneys who know what they're talking about. But you're fortunate you've got White Eagle right there. And I wish Jody were here. We've talked a little bit about this, but not enough. But I think she has got someone that might be more helpful to you. The other piece that's related to this, by the way, is that you have in the state of Washington one of the best nonprofit attorneys in the country. Judith Andrews right there in Seattle. And I can connect you up with her. I've been working with her for 14 years now. And she can answer questions. She gets all this. She's ready to go. So that's a possibility too. And she's an attorney. She can do nonprofit. She can do for profit. She's a great one. In the end, it really is up to the attorneys to do a little homework and learn something they didn't learn in law school. That's the way I look at it, and I push them a little bit about that. But I'm not surprised you had a little trouble. It's not everybody's bag.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim, for that question. And Lee, we heard from Freddie that he collaborated with a law school. And we've got a wonderful law school with some people we know personally. Is that something that you would recommend versus?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And could you also speak to your view of the 501c3 versus C13? There is, I believe, a strong interfaith interest in what we're hoping to do. And I believe there's something about if you're a religious organization, it might be easier. And have you seen an interfaith conservation burial have success?
Well, yeah, that's a really great and very complex question, because first of all, yes, if you have some kind of as far as the IRS is concerned, a faith community that is recognized by the IRS. Okay, so you don't, not every druid gets to go in and say, I've got a faith community. It may not be recognized. However, if you have a predominant faith community that's willing to sponsor the cemetery, okay, then that's all the IRS is really interested in. They want to know that there's something substantive with some backing here. So you can certainly have an interfaith group, no problem. There's one that I've been talking to a lot in Maryland, which is Muslim based, and they are opening it up. It's going to be for anyone and everyone, but they are holding it as a Muslim cemetery because that's the way that they can get all of their legal ducks in a row. In terms of the 501c3 13, that's a conversation to have with the attorney who can go deeper into the tax law on it, right? Which is where I have a husband who does that. He's a CPA. I let him deal with all that stuff. But when it comes to this, there are just so many hidden decisions to be made around that a C3, C13, some states only allow you to organize as a 13. It's that extra layer of protection for you. So if you're going if the nonprofit route, then in Washington State, 13 seems to be the go-to. Holly Blue, you had something.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Lee.
Right, and I feel like we've been covering it along the way. I'd actually like to loop back around to something that came up in our first half hour, Lee, which has to do with your thoughts on the potentials and pitfalls of attempting to partner with Indigenous groups for the sake of helping them out. And at what point would you imagine that as being, where would that fit into our developmental cycle?
Yeah, that's part of figuring out who your partners are. And I don't have personal experience with that, but Jody does, because the organization, of course, that is responsible for ECONI is the Sacred Earth Foundation. So I always rely on her for guidance around those issues. I think that more than anything, though, that taps for me sort of another hobby horse that I ride, which is around, and you spoke to it earlier, about social justice issues having to do with cemeteries. This is really important to me because right from the beginning, there's been this sort of elitist attitude around it. And the funeral directors who thank you, Freddie, for letting you know this. Funeral directors in most states don't have anything to do with cemeteries. Can't in many states. It's illegal. It is legal in your state, but that's not their primary job. That's not where they're supposed to be. So one of the things that, and they don't like change at all. So one of the things they did at the very beginning of the movement was to tell people that we can help you, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. Well, there's no reason for it to be more expensive. And in fact, this is an opportunity in funeral reform to say, no, we're going to put together a different schedule for the way we do this. We're going to treat grave sites differently. You know, the state may still require you to set up plats and plots and that type of thing, but it doesn't mean that in your actual, you know, activity in the cemetery, you can't use the land in a way that fits the land, not the state's requirement for where the bodies are. And in that same package, that same, you know, bucket of thinking is, how can we make these grave spaces more equitable and accessible? And that's part of our responsibility, I think. If we're going to reform the way we do cemeteries, let's go the whole 9 yards. Let's not keep using these damned old systems that don't fit us anymore. And let's find a way. So whether it's indigenous populations or anyone else, I don't care who it is. They want to be buried. They need an opportunity. And we need to make that happen.
I've got more questions, but I see Karen popping.
Yeah, I just have a question, because to me, it brings up kind of a paradox or contradiction with the idea of looking at existing, essentially real estate prices of plots as a basis, if we would jump to looking at even pricing models. If we're looking at really reform and letting the land dictate, or listening to the land, or wanting to be accessible to a variety of communities and economic situations, I'm just really open to brainstorming a variety of models rather than looking at, I mean, we need to look at what exists.
Yeah, just find out what it is.
Foundation, but I would like to jump much farther than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why the homework, right? Do your homework on what's already there and then figure out how to fix it. You know, when you look at some of these models, for instance, Foxfield in Ohio, they charge $4,000 per burial. $2,000 stays with the cemetery in order to manage overhead and upkeep and all that good stuff. The other $2,000 goes to the Wilderness Center, which is the land trust that they partner with.
Cool.
And that goes then toward further land acquisition and conservation on that land. So there's this is why not? This is a fabulous model. Now, somebody who's going to be buried in Wilmot down the street in the municipal cemetery is probably going to pay, you know, $600 or $800 for a plot, but are they going to get what they got over here? No, it's going to be a very different experience. What can they then do? Well, what they do then is look at who's coming in, and then they have donors, they have other people, another setup that helps to support those people coming in. So, you know, but you got to know what's happening in your area, because you're floating in a new idea. You're going to have to use their language to explain your language.
Thank you. I just want to give you such great kudos for your organization, your broad-based knowledge, and your generosity. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you. Sure.
Holly, did you want to wrap up? And Leanne has joined us. So glad you're here, Leanne. Go ahead, Holly.
So yeah, the other question that I wanted to ask Lee was, it goes back to, you mentioned the organization in Massachusetts, and I'm wondering, is that the same organization that's partnering with the Kestrel Land Trust? And they actually did a webinar back in February that I know Hillary and I both attended that webinar, and they just have released it again. And I thought that was such an interesting model, that where you know, these two groups like came together a long time. I think they've been looking for land for the last 10 years or something like that. And they're very specific. Could you just give us a little thumbnail sketch of what their process has been like?
Yeah, I honestly, I think it was kind of, I think they've done a really good job of like honing in on the people who those visionaries, the ones at the beginning, the inspirational folks. And they've done a good job of pulling others in. I think what has been a stumbling block for them is Massachusetts. which is, and I know I'm from New Hampshire and Vermont, but there's a significant difference in the levels of red tape and all that stuff that they've had to plow through, and the land issues. They're pretty much in an area that is one of the most expensive in the country, so they've been having a hard time finding land that's appropriate. I think it's just been slow going because it was not enough of a nucleus. And I think that they were sort of, I think they've been through a few iterations to get where they are. Fortunately, now they've got Judith Laurie and they've got Candace Curry, of course, my old, colleague from the Green Burial Council. And I think that there's more organization happening, but a lot of that means they have to backtrack to do things like the relationship building, because, you know what I mean? If you don't start with this big, wide, nucleus of energy that's moving forward at the same time, you're going to keep on slipping back. And I think that, I don't know, I'm not on the inside of the organization, but I would say that those things are probably some things that have slowed them down. Mostly it's real estate in Massachusetts. I imagine you're going to run into similar things yourself.
Lee, one of the things you mentioned was working with a professional facilitator as we drill down on our vision and all of that. Do you have any, considering we're living in a virtual world now, and as much as I would love for all of us to get together, and we have some folks that are further away, and it probably will be at least partially virtual. So do you have any recommendations or thoughts about people?
Yeah, I've had a couple people that I've used over the years, but I don't know that either one of them is still doing this kind of work. And I think part of it is, I think you want to get as close to green burial as you can, so that the person who's doing it understands what you're really trying to do. I defer to Holly Blue on that, actually. I think you probably got more people in your basket who might be able to help.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I have to dig in the basket, but I'll definitely think about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was very, very wet, not dry at all, Lee, okay? If you wanted to confirm that. And money is not something that we talk about in our culture, and it can seem very crass. Our culture, probably like the white culture would be what I mean. And so I just want to say that a lot of this feels overwhelming, but it feels like we have community. We have a lot of, us, and we're going to reach out and all that cool stuff. And I'm amazed. Where did you come from, Lee? And how did we get connected to you? Because you're exactly what we needed right now. And I think your assessment was completely on. I agree with where we're at. And I can't even fathom the amount that you are going to be helpful to us. So thank you very much. And I want to be crass, and I want to say some of this initial startup money may seem really like, oh my God, where are we going to get that? And then we'll have to do fundraisers before we even get started. And I just want to say, you guys know that I put one of my strengths in the pot is that I've got some dough, and I'm about to get some more, and it's a lot, and I don't know what the hell to do with it. So, this is going to be a really, I hope to get to share that resource with us in a beneficial way so that we can move forward just more smoothly without that fear factor of money. Obviously I can't fund the whole thing, but I'm just saying that startup stuff can be so scary and yet critical to carrying us forward and keeping the faith.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding us, Laura. I don't think any of us have forgotten your generosity, but thank you for continuing to be crass, which let's break that stereotype or that norm. It's okay to talk about money. Holly. Okay, so we've got 1 minute before we're going to turn it over to Kim for a minute.
Okay, so, as I keep mentioning, so I'm down here on Amamutsan land in the Monterey Bay, and I keep showing up in Washington. Why do I keep showing up in Washington? Because I see this amazing collection of energies and passion and desire to understand. And what I'm hoping that, is, as has been getting said, especially at the moment, one of the, people talk about COVID as having where are the silver linings? And I don't think in terms of silver linings. I think of this is a really expensive piece of curriculum, and I want to learn as much as I can while we're doing this. And one of the things that I see is that it's made it really clear to us that it's not about geography anymore. It's about time zones. It's like, can we physically be awake at the same time to have these kind of conversations? And I just again want to say how important it is to me that the knowledge base and the expertise that gets assembled here is not just for Washington State, but this is something that is an offering that can extend beyond the boundaries of Washington State. And for us to, I mean, there's Lee in New Hampshire. I'm in California. You guys are up in Washington State. But, out there in cyberspace, none of that really matters. And it gives us the opportunity to, in a sense, get off the planet and then dive into the places where our shared knowledge and passion can combine. And so I want to keep that conversation active also in this.
Thanks, Holly. I love thinking about our work coming from that place of generosity. It's pretty powerful. Okay, Lee, where do we leave it with you? Your time, thank you for spending this time with us today. And moving forward, I know that some of us are in touch with you, Holly is in touch with you. Do we dare tap you again at some point?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I'm going to do now that I've got my short list of things you need and what I've already put together for you, I'll send you a whole resources packet so that you can sort of start to do a little light reading. And hopefully, the sort of plot out, you were talking about timeline. There are a couple different, there's several different timelines that you're going to need to meet. So maybe we can sort of take from what I send you to, put those together.
Okay.
We'll see.
So if individuals of us, once you send that packet out, if an individual, if Evan has a question and he fires an email, is that?
Yeah, send it right to me. That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
I'm an open resource to whoever shows up.
Great. Thank you so much. Really.
Yeah, and there are more phases, so I can come back and explain those.
Okay. That's enough for now.
Good.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And I just want to say that, I'm going to be departing at 12:20. Hillary will kind of take over and close out our meeting from there. You guys can just leave the room. My husband's going to come up later and close out the Zoom. So, so when I disappear, don't worry that I've been raptured.
And we've got 2 minutes, and so I'd like to say we've been just given so much rich information last time with Freddie, today with Lee. And I'm going to propose one of two ways to go forward. One is to invite Jody Bueller, who is the person who directs White Eagle Burial Memorial Preserve, to answer our question, tell us her story, and then we come together and we kind of digest all of this information, or we digest first and then ask Jody. So if you want to take a moment, maybe put it in chat or just open up your mic for the next 20 seconds and tell me you want Jody next or digest together next.
Digest together next.
I was going to say, let's flip a coin and see if Jody's available. And if Jody's available, then we keep the conversation going.
Okay, and I see Karen has said Jody next for Big View. So how about we see if Jody's available. Laura, if would you be okay with that if Jody is available, and if she's not available, then we digest together. So expect
I'm
some.
good.
Go for it.
Sorry, I'm good with that. And I can do some mini digestion maybe with some of you.
Great.
I just
That
am
would
having
be
a big immediate response to today. So, and it fits in my personal life where I've been reassessing why I'm here on this planet. So it's an answer to that. Thank you.
excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Lee, for spending the time with us. And we know where you are. And so thank you. Thank you. And thank you for everybody being here today. It's been great.
Hillary, would you
Yes.
like to have us schedule something on our calendars now? Do we
You know
have
what?
time?
Let me check with Auntie because she's got a new job. But
Oh, okay.
let's assume in about 2 or 3 weeks we'll come back together, but we'll do kind of a Google poll to make sure it works for folks.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks again, Lee. That's
Yes.
wonderful of you.
Yeah, thank you. Got a lot. I can tell we have a lot more questions to answer.
Thanks. Great to see you, Leanne, also.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah, rather gimpy, but it's good to at least tag in at the end here.
And we'll catch you up.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was recorded, so you didn't really miss anything.
Yeah.
great. See you all next time. Thank
Later.
you.
Okay, everybody.
See you.
Bye-bye.